Victoria Hale woke up on a violent red-eye flight to find a man she'd never met bleeding through his sleeve because he'd spent the last hour shielding her from turbulence while she slept. She didn't ask for his protection. He didn't ask for her thanks. But that bruise would unravel her entire life. This is the story of a CEO who had everything except what mattered, and a single father who had nothing except what did. Stay until the end, like this video. Comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The flight attendant's voice crackled through the speakers at 11:47 p.m., but Victoria Hale didn't hear it. She was staring at her phone screen, watching the same email refresh for the 9th time in 6 minutes, as if the answer would somehow change. Kingsley Acquisition. Final decision. Ms. Hale, after careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with Meridian Corp. We appreciate your team's efforts. 3 months of work, 17 presentations, 42 conference calls, all of it gone in 2 sentences that didn't even bother with an apology. Victoria closed her eyes and let the phone drop into her lap. The worst part wasn't losing the deal. The worst part was that she didn't feel anything. Not anger, not disappointment, just the same hollow numbness that had been filling her chest since the funeral 3 weeks ago. Her father would have known what to say. He always did. But her father was dead, and the only thing waiting for her in New York was an empty penthouse and a company full of people who smiled at her in meetings and tore her apart in private Slack channels. "Excuse me," Victoria opened her eyes. A man stood in the aisle beside her seat, early 30s, dark hair that needed a trim, wearing a faded jacket that had seen better years. He gestured toward the window seat. "That's me. Sorry." She stood without speaking, stepped into the aisle, and let him slide past. He moved carefully, like someone used to making himself smaller in tight spaces. He sat down, buckled his seatbelt, and pulled out a worn paperback. Victoria caught the title as she settled back into her own seat. Charlotte's Web, a children's book. The cover was held together with clear packing tape. She looked away. The plane began taxiing. Outside the window, Seattle disappeared into sheets of rain that hammered against the fuselage like fists. The seatbelt sign blinked on. The cabin lights dimmed. Victoria leaned her head against the seat and tried not to think about anything at all. The turbulence started 20 minutes into the flight. At first, it was just a shudder, the kind of bump that makes passengers glance up from their phones and then go back to scrolling. But then, the plane dropped. Not figuratively, literally dropped. Victoria's stomach lurched into her throat as the aircraft fell through a pocket of dead air. Somewhere behind her, a woman gasped. A flight attendant braced herself against a seat. Then the plane caught itself, shuddering violently as it climbed back to altitude. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, calm and unhurried. "Folks, we're hitting some weather here. Nothing to worry about, but I'm going to keep that seatbelt sign on for a while. Flight attendants, please take your seats." Victoria's hands gripped the armrests. She hated flying. Always had. Her father used to joke that it was the one thing she couldn't control. And that's what scared her. He was right. 30,000 feet in the air, strapped into a metal tube, completely at the mercy of physics and weather and pilot competence. It was the opposite of everything Victoria had spent her life building. The plane bucked again. Harder this time. She closed her eyes and started counting breaths. 1, 2, 3. Her father had taught her that trick when she was 7 years old and couldn't sleep before her first piano recital. When you can't control what's happening outside, control what's happening inside. 4, 5, 6. But the counting wasn't working because every time she closed her eyes, all she saw was her father's hospital room. The machines, the monitors, the way his hand felt in hers during those last 3 hours. The plane dropped again. This time, Victoria didn't realize she was leaning sideways until her head came to rest against something solid. She was too exhausted to care. Ethan Cole noticed the woman beside him the moment she boarded. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in that sharp-edged, expensive suit kind of way that made him think of corner offices and business magazines. He noticed her because she looked like someone barely holding herself together. He recognized that look. He'd worn it himself for 2 years straight. She'd taken the aisle seat without glancing at him, her shoulders rigid, her jaw tight. Whatever she was carrying, it was heavy. Now, as the plane shook through another wave of turbulence, her head had somehow ended up against his shoulder. Ethan froze. He could feel the weight of her there, solid and real and completely unconscious. She'd fallen asleep mid-panic, her body finally surrendering to whatever exhaustion she'd been fighting. He should wake her up. That was the normal thing to do. But she looked so tired. And the turbulence was getting worse. The plane jerked left, hard enough that Ethan's shoulder slammed into the window. He bit down on the inside of his cheek to keep from making noise. The woman didn't stir. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan held himself as still as possible while the aircraft bucked and swayed through the storm. Every time the plane dropped, he braced his arm against the seat in front of him to keep her head from snapping forward. Every time it rolled, he shifted his weight to absorb the impact. His shoulders started aching around the 30-minute mark. By 45 minutes, his entire arm had gone numb. But she was still sleeping. Ethan told himself it was fine. He'd spent worse nights than this. Last month, he'd worked a double shift at the maintenance company, gone straight to his second job stocking shelves at a warehouse, and then stayed up until 3 a.m. because Emma had a fever and couldn't sleep without him reading to her. This was nothing. The plane bucked again, harder than before. Ethan's arm hit the window with enough force that he felt something twist wrong in his shoulder. Pain shot down to his elbow. He didn't move. The woman shifted slightly, her breath evening out. Still asleep. Ethan looked down at her. In the dim cabin light, he could see the exhaustion written into every line of her face. Whatever she was running from, it had chased her straight into unconsciousness. He knew that feeling too. Slowly, carefully, Ethan reached for his jacket in the overhead compartment. It took some maneuvering to pull it down without waking her, but he managed. He draped it over her shoulders like a blanket. She didn't wake up. The turbulence finally started to ease around the 1-hour mark. The plane stopped dropping, the shaking reduced to an occasional shudder. Ethan's arm felt like it had been beaten with a baseball bat, but the woman beside him was still sleeping peacefully. He let out a long, slow breath. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Carefully, he pulled it out and checked the screen. Emma. Daddy, when are you coming home? Emma. I miss you. A photo followed. Emma sitting in Mrs. Martinez's living room, holding up a drawing of what appeared to be a dragon wearing a top hat. The dragon was purple. The top hat was covered in stars. Ethan smiled despite the pain in his shoulder. Ethan. Soon, sweetheart. I miss you too. Ethan. Is that a fancy dragon? Emma. Yes. His name is Sir Sparkles. Emma. Mrs. Martinez says you bringing cookies? Ethan glanced at his backpack under the seat in front of him. Inside was a small bakery box containing 6 moon-shaped sugar cookies, Emma's favorite. He'd stopped at the grocery store on his way to the airport, even though it meant catching a later flight. Ethan. Moon cookies, your favorite. Emma. Yay! 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 Emma. Love you, Daddy? Ethan. Love you more, Em. He put the phone away and leaned his head back against the seat. His arm throbbed. His shoulder felt like someone had stuck a knife between the bones. But Emma was happy, and that was all that mattered. Beside him, the woman stirred. Victoria woke up slowly, swimming up through layers of exhaustion like someone climbing out of deep water. The first thing she noticed was warmth. The second thing was that she wasn't in her own seat. Her eyes snapped open. She was leaning against the shoulder of the man beside her, the stranger with the taped-up paperback and the worn jacket. Except his jacket wasn't on him anymore. It was draped over her shoulders like a blanket. Victoria jerked upright. I'm sorry. It's okay. His voice was quiet, careful not to draw attention from other passengers. You fell asleep. Turbulence was pretty bad. Victoria's face burned. She never fell asleep on planes. She certainly never fell asleep on strangers. I didn't mean to. She stopped. How long? About an hour. An hour. Victoria looked down at the jacket still covering her shoulders. It was old but clean, with frayed cuffs and a small tear in the left pocket that someone had sewn shut with mismatched thread. She started to hand it back to him, and that's when she saw his arm. A massive purple bruise was spreading across his right forearm, dark and angry even in the dim cabin light. It looked fresh. It looked painful. What happened? The words came out sharper than she intended. He glanced down at his arm like he'd forgotten about it. Oh, that. Just bumped it during the turbulence. But Victoria wasn't stupid. She'd spent 15 years reading people in boardrooms and negotiating tables. She knew when someone was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. The plane had been shaking violently. She'd been asleep on his shoulder, and now he had a bruise that looked like someone had hit him with a hammer. He'd protected her. For an entire hour, this complete stranger had let himself get battered by turbulence rather than wake her up. Victoria didn't know what to say. "You should ice that," she finally managed. "I will when we land." He took his jacket back, folding it carefully across his lap. "Really, it's fine." They sat in silence for a moment. The plane had leveled out. Around them, passengers were starting to relax, pulling out laptops, ordering drinks from the flight attendants who'd finally been cleared to move around the cabin. Victoria should go back to her emails. She should review the quarterly reports waiting in her inbox. She should do something productive. Instead, she said, "Thank you." He looked at her, surprised. "For the jacket," Victoria clarified, "and for not waking me up." "You looked like you needed the sleep." There was something in the way he said it. No judgment, no pity, just a simple statement of fact that made Victoria's throat tighten unexpectedly. She turned toward the window before he could see her face. They didn't speak again for the rest of the flight. Victoria tried to focus on work, but her laptop sat unopened in her bag. Instead, she found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. He'd pulled out his phone and was texting someone, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Then he opened a video call. Victoria couldn't help but hear it. "Daddy!" The voice was high and sweet. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. On the phone screen, Victoria caught a glimpse of messy brown hair and a gap-toothed smile. "Hey, Em." His entire face softened. "Did you brush your teeth?" "Yes, Mrs. Martinez checked." "Good girl. What are you doing?" "Drawing! Look!" The camera swung wildly, showing a piece of paper covered in crayon scribbles. "It's you and me and the moon." "That's beautiful, sweetheart. When you coming home?" "My plane lands in about 2 hours. But then I have to take the train, so it might be late. You should be asleep by then." "No! I want to see you!" "I'll be there when you wake up. I promise." He paused. "And I've got your cookies." The little girl squealed so loudly that several passengers looked over. "Sorry," he mouthed to no one in particular, then turned back to the phone. Inside voice, Em. "Sorry, Daddy. I just really love moon cookies." "I know you do." His voice went softer. "I love you, Emma Grace." "Love you more." "Not possible." "It's too possible." "We'll argue about it tomorrow. Now, go brush your teeth again." I heard that pause. "Daddy!" "Teeth, now!" The girl giggled and the call ended. He sat there for a moment, still smiling at the blank screen, before putting the phone away. Victoria looked out the window and tried to ignore the strange ache in her chest. The plane landed at JFK at 2:47 a.m. Victoria gathered her things efficiently: laptop bag, carry-on, coat. She was one of the first people standing when the seatbelt sign turned off. The man beside her took his time. He pulled his backpack from under the seat carefully, like it contained something fragile. The bakery box, Victoria realized. The moon cookies. She should say something. Thank you again, maybe. Or goodbye. Instead, she stepped into the aisle and let the crowd carry her forward. But at the terminal, while waiting for her driver, Victoria found herself scanning the crowd. She didn't know what she was looking for until she spotted him. Walking toward the train station, backpack slung over one shoulder, bakery box held carefully in both hands. He didn't look back. Victoria's driver appeared with a sign bearing her name. She followed him to the black SUV waiting at the curb and climbed into the back seat. Her phone buzzed. Board meeting, 9 a.m. Victoria, we need to discuss the Kingsley situation. Several board members have concerns. Richard, of course they did. Victoria closed her eyes and leaned her head against the cool window. For some reason, all she could think about was the bruise on that stranger's arm, the way he'd smiled at his daughter through a phone screen, the careful way he'd carried those cookies like they were made of glass. She didn't even know his name. The penthouse was exactly as Victoria had left it, spotless, silent, empty. She dropped her bags by the door and walked through rooms that looked like they'd been staged for a magazine shoot. White walls, minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, 1,800 square feet of expensive loneliness. Victoria poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window. The city glittered below her, millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them moving forward while she stood frozen. Her father had lived in this building too, 3 floors down. After her mother died, he'd sold the family house in Connecticut and moved here to be closer to the company, closer to Victoria. "You work too hard," he'd told her over dinner 6 months before the diagnosis. "When's the last time you did something just because it made you happy?" "Work makes me happy," Victoria had replied. Her father had given her a look that said he knew she was lying but loved her too much to call her out on it. Now he was gone, and Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd felt anything close to happy. She thought about the man on the plane again, the way he'd held his daughter's drawing like it was a Picasso, the way he'd smiled when she said she loved him. Victoria had built an empire. She had wealth and power and influence, but she didn't have anyone who squealed with joy at the thought of seeing her. She set down the water glass and walked to her bedroom. Tomorrow, she'd go back to being Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Dynamics. She'd sit through the board meeting and defend her decisions and pretend the Kingsley deal didn't matter. But tonight, for just a few more hours, she let herself feel the weight of everything she'd lost. Ethan got home at 4:30 a.m. The apartment was dark except for a small lamp Mrs. Martinez had left on in the living room. She was asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin. "Mrs. Martinez." Ethan touched her shoulder gently. "I'm home." She woke with a start, then smiled when she saw him. "Ethan, how was Seattle?" "Long. Thank you for watching Emma." "Always." Mrs. Martinez stood, gathering her things. "She was an angel. We made cookies. Well, she made cookies. I supervised. There's a batch in the kitchen. I don't know if they're edible." Ethan smiled. "I'm sure they're perfect." After Mrs. Martinez left, Ethan locked the door and stood in the quiet apartment. It was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. The furniture was mismatched. The carpet was stained. The ceiling had a watermark from a leak 2 years ago that the landlord still hadn't fixed. But Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator. Her toys were scattered across the floor. Her favorite blanket was draped over the back of the couch. It was home. Ethan walked to the bedroom. Emma was sprawled across the bed like a starfish, her mouth slightly open, one arm hanging off the edge. She'd fallen asleep in her clothes again. He set the bakery box on the dresser and carefully lifted Emma, tucking her under the covers. She stirred but didn't wake. "I'm home, sweetheart," Ethan whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Emma mumbled something that sounded like moon cookies and burrowed deeper into the pillow. Ethan smiled. His arm was still throbbing. His shoulder felt like someone had beaten it with a brick. He'd been awake for almost 24 hours straight, but Emma was safe. Emma was happy. That was all that mattered. Impulse. 3 days later, Victoria was in back-to-back meetings when her assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Miss Hale, sorry to interrupt. There's a situation in the server room." Victoria excused herself and followed her assistant down to the building's lower level. The server room was chaos, 3 engineers standing around looking panicked, monitors displaying error messages in angry red text. "What happened?" "We don't know." Mark Chen, her head of IT, looked like he might cry. "The system just crashed. We've lost access to the entire client database." "How long to fix it?" "We're working on it, but—" Mark hesitated. "It's bad, Victoria. Really bad. We're looking at potential data loss. The backup systems aren't responding either." Victoria's jaw tightened. Hale Dynamics stored financial data for 47 major clients. If they lost that data, or if it leaked, the company would be finished. "Get whoever you need. I don't care what it costs." "We've already called in everyone, but the regular contractors are all booked. There's only one guy available, and he's—" Mark trailed off. "He's what?" "He's a maintenance technician, low level. But he used to be a systems engineer before—" Mark stopped himself. "Look, I don't know the whole story. I just know he's available and his references are solid." "Then get him here. Now." 2 hours later, Ethan Cole walked into the Hale Dynamics server room. Victoria, standing in the back of the room reviewing damage reports, looked up when he entered. And froze. It was him, the man from the plane. The one with the bruised arm and the taped-up children's book, and the daughter who loved moon cookies. Ethan saw her at the same moment. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't say anything. just gave her a small nod of recognition before turning his attention to the panicking engineers. "Talk me through what happened," Ethan said. For the next 6 hours, Victoria watched him work. He didn't raise his voice, didn't panic, didn't make excuses. He asked precise questions, listening carefully to the answers before moving to the next problem. While the other engineers argued about protocols and theories, Ethan got down on his hands and knees and started physically checking hardware connections. "Found it," he said finally, holding up a frayed cable. "This is your problem. Looks like it's been deteriorating for a while. Probably water damage from that leak you had last month." Mark Chen stared at him. "We checked those cables. You checked the visible ones? This one's behind the backup housing." Ethan stood, brushing dust off his pants. "You'll need to replace it and run a full diagnostic on the connected drives. The data's probably fine, but you'll want to verify before bringing the system back online." "How did you—" Mark started. "I used to design these systems." Ethan's voice was neutral. "Before." "Before what?" Victoria wondered. But Ethan didn't elaborate. He just packed up his tools and headed for the door. "Wait!" Victoria's voice stopped him. "You just saved this company millions of dollars." He turned. "I just did my job." Most people would want recognition for that, a bonus, something. Ethan's expression didn't change. "I don't need recognition. I need to get home to my daughter." He left before Victoria could say anything else. Mark Chen watched him go, shaking his head. "That guy's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And he's wasting it working maintenance jobs." "Why?" Victoria asked. "No idea. But whatever happened before, it killed his career." Victoria stared at the door Ethan had walked through. She couldn't stop thinking about the bruise on his arm, the way he'd protected her during that flight without asking for anything in return, the way he'd just saved her company and walked away like it didn't matter. "Find out everything you can about him," Victoria told her assistant. "I want to know who Ethan Cole is. I must say." The report landed on Victoria's desk 2 days later. She read it alone in her office after everyone else had gone home. Ethan Michael Cole, age 32. 32. Current employment, maintenance technician, Brooks Building Services, stock associate, Morrison Warehouse. The basic facts were sparse, but the deeper Victoria read, the more the story revealed itself. 5 years ago, Ethan Cole had been a rising star in systems engineering. He developed proprietary software for a major tech firm, something revolutionary in data security. The company had promised him equity, recognition, a future. Instead, they'd stolen his work. Victoria found the details buried in court documents. Ethan had filed suit against his employers, claiming they'd taken his code, patented it under the company name, and offered him nothing. The case had dragged on for 8 months before being quietly settled out of court. No money, no recognition, just a non-disclosure agreement that prevented Ethan from talking about his own work. Then, 6 months after the settlement, his daughter had been diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. The medical bills started immediately. His wife, Victoria found a divorce filing dated 18 months ago, had left shortly after the diagnosis, just walked away from both of them. Ethan had been raising Emma alone ever since, working 2 jobs to pay for doctors and specialists and medications. Victoria set down the report and stared at her computer screen. This man had been betrayed by people he trusted, abandoned by someone who'd promised to stand beside him, left to carry everything alone. And still, on a turbulent flight in the middle of the night, he'd protected a stranger without expecting anything in return. Victoria picked up her phone. "I want to offer Ethan Cole a consulting position," she told Mark Chen. "Full benefits. Salary commensurate with his experience, and I want it done tomorrow." "Are you sure?" "He's kind of prickly about corporate environments." "I'm sure." Because Victoria understood something now that she hadn't before. The world was full of people who took what they wanted and stepped on anyone in their way. She'd spent 15 years swimming in those waters. But people like Ethan Cole, people who gave without asking, who protected without expecting thanks, who measured their lives in moon cookies and gap-toothed smiles instead of stock options and corner offices, those people were rare. And Victoria wasn't going to let this one slip away. Ethan was replacing a broken light fixture in the lobby of a commercial building when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. "This is Ethan." "Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer Park from Hale Dynamics. Ms. Hale would like to meet with you regarding a consulting opportunity." Ethan nearly dropped his screwdriver. "I'm sorry, what?" A consulting position. Ms. Hale was very impressed with your work on our server crisis last week. She'd like to discuss bringing you on board in a more permanent capacity. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were covered in dust and electrical tape residue. His work shirt had a coffee stain on the collar that hadn't come out in the wash. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for corporate work right now. There was a pause on the other end. The salary would be substantial, Mr. Cole. 6 figures, full benefits, flexible hours. I'm sure it would be, but I'm still going to pass. May I ask why? Because he'd already been down that road. Because he'd already trusted people in expensive suits who made promises they had no intention of keeping. Because the last time he'd worked in a corporate environment, they'd stolen 2 years of his life and left him with nothing but legal bills and a non-disclosure agreement. Personal reasons, Ethan said. Please thank Ms. Hale for thinking of me. He hung up before she could argue. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and stared at his bank statement. The numbers didn't lie. Emma's next cardiology appointment was in 3 weeks. The medication alone was eating through his paycheck faster than he could earn it. A 6-figure salary would solve everything. But money wasn't worth his soul. He'd learned that the hard way. Ethan closed the laptop and went to bed. The next morning, Victoria showed up at his apartment. Ethan opened the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, Emma clinging to his leg and peering around at the stranger with curious brown eyes. Victoria looked completely out of place in the dingy hallway, tailored coat, expensive boots, the kind of pulled-together appearance that came from having people whose entire job was making sure you looked perfect. Ms. Hale, Ethan said carefully, this is unexpected. You wouldn't take my call. I answered your call. I just said no. Victoria's eyes flicked down to Emma, then back to Ethan. Can we talk? I promise this won't take long. Emma tugged on Ethan's shirt. Daddy, who's that? Someone from work, sweetheart. Ethan hesitated, then stepped back. Come in, but I meant what I said on the phone. Victoria stepped into the small apartment, and Ethan watched her take it in. The peeling linoleum, the secondhand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling that looked worse in daylight. But her expression didn't change. She just looked at Emma's drawings covering every available surface, and something in her face softened. You're an artist, Victoria said to Emma. Emma lit up. I draw dragons. Want to see? Emma, Ms. Hale is busy. I'd love to see, Victoria said. And just like that, Emma grabbed Victoria's hand and dragged her to the coffee table, where approximately 73 pieces of construction paper were scattered like confetti. This one's Sir Sparkles, this one's Lady Glitter, this one's Baby Boom. He's still learning to fly, so he keeps falling down, but it's okay because dragons are really bouncy. Victoria sat down on the floor, actually sat down on Ethan's stained carpet in her $1,000 coat, and listened to Emma explain her entire dragon universe with the kind of serious attention most adults reserved for board meetings. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway and had no idea what to do with that. After 10 minutes of dragon talk, Victoria glanced up at him. Could we speak privately for a moment? Ethan nodded. Em, can you go draw me a picture of what you want for breakfast? Pancakes with chocolate chips. Draw it anyway. Emma grabbed her crayons and relocated to the other side of the room, humming to herself. Victoria stood, brushing off her coat. She was still holding one of Emma's drawings, a purple dragon with 17 legs and what might have been a crown. I'm not here to pressure you, Victoria said quietly. I just wanted to understand why you said no. Because I don't work in corporate environments anymore. Why not? Ethan's jaw tightened. That's personal. I know what happened with your previous employer. Of course she did. People like Victoria Hale didn't make offers without doing research first. Then you know why I'm not interested in going back. Victoria set down the drawing. I'm not them. Maybe not. But the system's the same. You hire people like me, use us until we're empty, and then throw us away when we're not useful anymore. That's not what I do, isn't it? Ethan crossed his arms. You run a company worth $500 million. You didn't get there by being nice to people. He expected her to get defensive, to argue, to prove his point by turning cold and corporate. Instead, Victoria looked at him for a long moment and said, You're right. That caught him off guard. I've made decisions that hurt people, Victoria continued. I've fired employees to cut costs. I've pushed out competitors. I've done things I'm not proud of because I thought that's what success looked like. She paused. But I'm trying to do better, and I think you could help me figure out how. I'm not interested in being your corporate conscience. That's not what I'm asking for. Victoria's voice was steady. I'm asking you to take a job where your skills are valued, where you're compensated fairly, and where you have the flexibility to take care of your daughter. That's it. No games. No stolen credit. Just work. Ethan wanted to say no. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to show her the door and go back to his safe, small life where nobody could hurt him. But then Emma called out from across the room, "Daddy, I finished! It's pancakes wearing sunglasses!" And Ethan thought about the medical bills stacked on his dresser, the appointment in 3 weeks, the medication that cost more than his rent. "I need to think about it," he heard himself say. Victoria nodded. "That's fair." She pulled a business card from her pocket and set it on the counter. "My personal number's on there. Call me when you decide." She started toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You said the system's the same everywhere. But systems are just made of people, and people can change." Victoria looked back at Emma, who was now adding a top hat to her pancake drawing. "Some of us are trying to, anyway." She left before Ethan could respond. Emma appeared at his elbow immediately. "I like her. She listens good." Ethan looked down at his daughter. "Yeah, she does." That night, after Emma fell asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and stared at Victoria's business card for 45 minutes. Then he picked up the phone. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Ethan, I have conditions." "I'm listening." "I work remotely 3 days a week. I need to be here when Emma gets home from school. I need flexibility for doctor's appointments. She has them every month. And if I ever feel like I'm being used or manipulated, I walk. No notice, no explanation. I just walk." There was a pause. "Done," Victoria said. "Anything else?" "Yeah, I want it in writing. All of it. You'll have a contract by tomorrow morning." Another pause. "Thank you, Ethan. I know this wasn't easy. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Emma." "I know." Victoria's voice was quiet. "But thank you anyway." Ethan hung up and sat in the dark kitchen, wondering if he'd just made the best decision of his life or the worst. The contract arrived at 6 a.m. the next morning. Everything Ethan had asked for was there, in clear language, with no corporate doublespeak. He read it 3 times, looking for the catch. He couldn't find one. Ethan signed it and started work the following Monday. The first week was awkward. The other engineers didn't know what to make of him. This guy who'd been brought in over their heads, who showed up in jeans instead of business casual, who left every day at exactly 3 p.m. to pick up his kid. Mark Chen was the worst. He kept assigning Ethan menial tasks, the kind of work you'd give an intern, and watching with barely concealed resentment when Ethan finished them in half the expected time. On Thursday, Mark cornered him in the break room. "So what's your deal, man? You sleeping with the boss or something?" Ethan looked up from his coffee. "What?" "Come on. Nobody gets hired at your level without interviews, without going through channels. You just show up one day with a corner office and Victoria Hale's personal phone number." "I don't have a corner office. I have a desk." "You know what I mean." Mark's voice dropped. "Some of us have been here for years. We've put in the time. And then you just waltz in because you fixed one server problem. Then maybe you should have fixed it yourself." Mark's face went red. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Ethan set down his coffee. "You had 4 engineers standing around arguing about protocols while your entire system crashed. None of you thought to check the hardware. None of you got on your hands and knees and did the actual work. You just stood there and panicked. We were following procedure. Procedure doesn't mean anything if it doesn't solve the problem." Ethan picked up his coffee and headed for the door. "Maybe that's why Ms. Hale hired me." He left Mark standing there, fuming. That night, Victoria called him. "I heard you had a run-in with Mark." Ethan sighed. "Word travels fast." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. He's just territorial. I get it." "You don't have to put up with that kind of behavior." "Yes, I do. If I run to you every time someone's rude to me, I'm exactly what they think I am. Someone who got this job because of personal connections instead of skill." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just let me handle it my way." "Okay." Another pause. "How's Emma doing?" The question surprised him. "She's good. She has an appointment next week." "Let me know if you need time off." "I will." After they hung up, Ethan sat on his couch and realized something strange. That was the first time in 5 years that a boss had asked about his daughter. The following week, Emma's appointment didn't go well. The cardiologist showed Ethan a series of scans and used words like progressive deterioration and surgical intervention and sooner rather than later. Ethan sat in the examination room after the doctor left and tried to keep breathing. Emma was in the waiting room with a nurse, drawing pictures and completely unaware that her father's world was falling apart. Surgery. They were talking about open heart surgery on a 6-year-old. Ethan's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs and counted to 10. Then he counted to 20. Then he pulled out his phone and called the one person he knew would answer. Ethan, what's wrong? Victoria's voice was sharp with concern. Ethan realized he'd never called her during work hours before. I'm at the hospital. Emma's appointment. His voice cracked. They're saying she needs surgery. Where are you? Mercy, General, but I'm fine. He wasn't fine. He was the opposite of fine. I needed to tell someone. I'm coming. You don't have to. I'm already in the car. Stay there. She hung up before he could argue. Victoria arrived 23 minutes later, still in her business suit, slightly out of breath like she'd been running. She found Ethan in the hallway outside the waiting room, standing very still, staring at nothing. Tell me what happened. So Ethan told her about the scans, the timeline, the fact that Emma needed surgery within the next 8 weeks, or the damage to her heart might become irreversible. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "What do you need?" "I don't know." "Okay, let's start with what we do know." Victoria pulled out her phone. "What's the surgeon's name?" "Dr. Patricia Lawson." Victoria typed something. "She's one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the state." "That's good." "What did she say about success rates?" 85% for cases like Emma's." "That's better than good. That's excellent." Victoria looked at him. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but those are strong numbers, Ethan." 15% isn't. "No," Victoria agreed quietly. "It's not." They stood there in the fluorescent hallway, surrounded by the antiseptic smell of hospital air and the distant beeping of monitors. "I can't lose her," Ethan said. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "She's all I have." "I know. If something happens, if I make the wrong choice, you won't." Victoria's voice was firm. "You're going to make the best choice you can with the information you have, and then you're going to trust that it's enough. Because that's all any of us can do." Ethan looked at her. "Is that what you did when your father was sick?" He regretted it immediately. He'd crossed a line, brought up something personal, something painful. But Victoria didn't flinch. "No," she said. "When my father was sick, I pretended I could control it. I read every medical journal, consulted every specialist, convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, I could fix it." She paused. "I was wrong. And by the time I accepted that, it was too late to just be his daughter instead of his project manager. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just don't make my mistake." Victoria glanced toward the waiting room where Emma was visible through the window, holding up a drawing for the nurse to admire. "She doesn't need you to be perfect. She just needs you to be there." Ethan's throat felt tight. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." They went back into the waiting room together. Emma looked up and immediately ran to Ethan. "Daddy, I drew you and me and Victoria as dragons." Ethan picked her up, holding her close. "Let me see." The drawing showed 3 dragons standing in a row. The middle one, Emma, clearly, was purple with 17 legs. The one on the left had messy hair and was holding what appeared to be a toolbox. The one on the right was wearing a business suit and a crown. "That's you," Emma said, pointing to the dragon with the toolbox. "And that's Victoria. She's a queen dragon because she's important." Victoria laughed. Actually, laughed. And for a moment, the weight of the hospital seemed to lift. "I love it," Victoria said. "Can I keep it?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Really?" "Really. I'll put it in my office." Emma beamed, and Ethan felt something in his chest shift. Not much, not enough to fix anything, but enough to remind him that there were still good things in the world, even in the middle of the hard parts. They left the hospital together. Victoria insisted on driving them home, even though Ethan said they could take the train. "It's out of your way," Ethan protested. "I don't care." In the car, Emma fell asleep in her booster seat, worn out from the appointment and the emotional weight she didn't fully understand yet. Ethan watched the city pass outside the window. "I can't afford the surgery." Victoria didn't take her eyes off the road. "Yes, you can. The insurance covers some of it, But the deductible alone, I'll cover it. No. Ethan, I said no. His voice was harder than he intended. I'm not taking your money. It's not charity. Consider it a signing bonus. You already gave me a signing bonus. Then consider it a loan. I can't pay back that kind of loan, and you know it. They sat in silence for several blocks. Finally, Victoria said, Then what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I always do. Victoria's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but she didn't argue. When they reached Ethan's apartment building, she helped him carry a sleeping Emma upstairs. Ethan unlocked the door and Victoria carefully laid Emma on the couch, pulling a blanket over her. Thank you, Ethan said again, for everything today. Victoria looked at him. In the dim light of the apartment, she looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from work, but the deeper kind that settled into bones and didn't leave. When my father was dying, I was alone, she said quietly. I had 100 employees, a dozen board members, more money than I could ever spend. But when it mattered, I was completely alone. She paused. You don't have to be. I'm used to alone. I know, but maybe you don't have to be used to it anymore. She left before Ethan could figure out how to respond to that. Over the next 3 weeks, something strange happened. Victoria started showing up at the apartment after work. Not every night, just 2 or 3 times a week. She'd bring dinner or coffee, or sometimes just herself. She'd sit at the kitchen table while Ethan cooked and Emma did homework, and she'd ask about their day like she actually cared about the answer. The first time she stayed for dinner, Ethan had no idea what to make of it. You don't have to do this, he said, while Emma was in the bathroom. Do what? This. Whatever this is. Coming here, bringing food, acting like we're friends. Victoria looked at him. Aren't we? I don't know. Are we? I'd like to be. And that was that. Emma loved it. She'd started calling Victoria the Queen Lady and insisted on showing her every new drawing, every school project, every random thought that popped into her 6-year-old brain. Victoria never acted bored or impatient. She listened like Emma was the most interesting person in the world. One night, while Victoria was helping Emma build a blanket fort, Ethan stood in the kitchen and watched them. Victoria was laughing, really laughing, not the polite corporate version, as Emma declared that all dragons needed at least 3 towers and a secret password. This woman ran a company worth $500 million. She had meetings with investors, conference calls with international clients, decisions that affected hundreds of people's livelihoods. And she was on her hands and knees in a tiny apartment, holding up blankets so a 6-year-old could build a dragon castle. Dad, Victoria needs to be knighted. Ethan walked over. Knighted? She's joining the Dragon Kingdom. Emma was breathless with excitement. She needs a dragon name. What's my dragon name? Ethan asked. Sir Toolbox. Because you fix things. Emma turned to Victoria. You should be Lady... She thought hard. Lady Star. Because you're shiny and important. Victoria grinned. Lady Star it is. I accept this great honor. Emma tapped her shoulder with a cardboard tube sword. I knight you Lady Star of the Dragon Kingdom. You have to protect us from evil and bring snacks. I vow to fulfill my duties with honor, Victoria said solemnly. That night, after Emma fell asleep and Victoria was getting ready to leave, she paused at the door. I need to tell you something. Ethan looked up from the dishes. What? I've been looking into Emma's surgery. Not behind your back, she added quickly when she saw his expression. Just research. There's a program at Boston Children's Hospital, experimental, but the success rate for cases like Emma's is over 95%. I can't afford experimental surgery in Boston. The program covers costs for qualified candidates. I can get you an application. Ethan set down the dish towel. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Because Emma deserves the best possible care. Because you're my friend and I... Victoria stopped. Because I want to help. Please let me help. And Ethan, who'd spent 5 years refusing help from anyone, heard himself say, okay. The application took 2 weeks to process. During that time, Victoria was at the apartment almost every night. She helped Emma practice writing her letters. She learned to make moon-shaped cookies from a YouTube tutorial and burned the first batch so badly they had to open all the windows. She sat on the couch and listened while Ethan talked about his fears for the surgery, his guilt over Emma's mother leaving, his anger at the corporate world that had chewed him up and spit him out. And slowly, without either of them quite realizing when it happened, the walls Ethan had built around himself started to crack. One Friday night, Emma fell asleep early, and Ethan and Victoria were left sitting on the couch with 2 empty coffee mugs and the comfortable silence of people who'd run out of things to say but didn't need to fill the space with noise. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said finally. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, walking away from engineering?" Ethan thought about it. "Sometimes. I love the work, the problem solving, the creativity of it, building something from nothing." He paused. "But I don't regret choosing Emma, even on the hard days." "You're a good father." "I'm trying to be. That's more than a lot of people do." Victoria looked down at her hands. "My father tried too. He wasn't perfect, but he tried. I didn't appreciate it enough while he was alive." He knew. Did he? Parents always know, even when kids don't say it. Ethan glanced toward Emma's sleeping form. "Trust me." They sat quietly for another moment. Then Victoria said, "I haven't laughed this much in years, since before my father got sick. Maybe before that." Emma has that effect on people. "It's not just Emma." Victoria looked at him. "You make me feel like it's okay to stop performing, like I don't have to be Victoria Hale's CEO. I can just be Victoria." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just sat there, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, and let the moment be what it was. The acceptance from Boston Children's Hospital came 3 days later. Emma had been selected for the program. Surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks out. All costs covered. Ethan read the letter 4 times before he believed it was real. Then he called Victoria. She got in. Victoria's voice was bright with relief. "I knew she would. Thank you. I don't know how to..." Ethan's voice caught. "Thank you. You don't have to thank me. Just focus on getting Emma through this. Will you come with us? To Boston?" Silence. Then quietly, "Do you want me there?" "Yeah," Ethan said, "I do." "Then I'll be there." But before they could make it to Boston, everything fell apart. It started with a system breach at Hale Dynamics, a massive cyber attack that locked down servers, encrypted files, and threatened to leak sensitive client data. The IT department went into crisis mode. Ethan spent 3 straight days at the office, barely sleeping, trying to trace the source of the attack. On the 4th day, he found it. The breach hadn't come from outside. It had come from within the company. Someone with high-level access had deliberately opened a back door and invited the attack in. Ethan traced the digital fingerprints back through layers of encrypted routing and proxy servers until he found a name. Sebastian Ward, board member. Victoria's father's old business partner, the man who'd been with Hale Dynamics since the beginning. Ethan stared at the evidence on his screen and felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just a cyber attack. This was a corporate coup. He printed everything, put it in a folder, and went straight to Victoria's office. She was on a conference call. Ethan waited in the hallway, gripping the folder so hard his knuckles went white. When she finally emerged, she took one look at his face and said, "What's wrong?" "We need to talk, privately." They went back into her office. Ethan closed the door and handed her the folder. "Sebastian Ward is behind the cyber attack." Victoria stared at him. "What?" "He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. The attack was designed to look like an external breach, but he opened the door himself. And I think I know why." He walked her through it. The attack had been timed to coincide with the quarterly board meeting. The leaked data, if it went public, would tank the company's stock price and destroy Victoria's credibility as CEO. The board would have grounds to remove her. And Sebastian, as the longest-serving board member and the person who'd discovered the breach, would be perfectly positioned to step in as interim CEO. "He's been positioning himself for this for years," Ethan said. "Every time you've made a progressive decision, better benefits, higher wages, ethical sourcing, he's been undermining you behind the scenes." Victoria's face had gone pale. "My father trusted him." "I know. They started this company together." "I know." She sat down hard in her chair. "How do we prove it?" "That's the problem. This evidence is solid from a technical standpoint, but Sebastian's covered his tracks legally. Any lawyer worth their salary could argue that someone else used his credentials. We'd need more." "Then we get more." Victoria, I'm not letting him destroy what my father built. Her voice was steel. We find a way to prove it. But they didn't get the chance. The next morning, headlines exploded across the business news sites. Hale Dynamics CEO in inappropriate relationship with employee. Victoria Hale's consulting hire raises ethics questions from maintenance man to executive. How did Ethan Cole really get his job? The articles were brutal. They showed photos of Victoria entering Ethan's apartment building, of them having coffee together, of Victoria carrying a sleeping Emma up the stairs. The implication was clear. Ethan had manipulated his way into the company through a personal relationship with the CEO. Ethan's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. By 7 a.m., there were reporters outside his apartment building. Emma was crying, scared by the strangers with cameras. Mrs. Martinez had to sneak them out the back entrance. Ethan got Emma to school. Thankfully, the press hadn't found her school yet, and headed straight to Hale Dynamics. The office was chaos, employees whispering, people staring as he walked to Victoria's office. She was in an emergency board meeting. Ethan waited outside for 2 hours until she emerged, looking like she'd aged 5 years in a single morning. "This is Sebastian," Victoria said without preamble. "He leaked the story." "I know. The board wants your resignation. They're saying you're a liability." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Fine, I'll resign." "No." "Victoria," I said no. Her voice was fierce. "I'm not letting him do this. I'm not letting him turn you into a casualty of his power play. If I don't resign, this gets worse for you. The board will use it as ammunition. They'll say your judgment is compromised, that you're putting personal relationships ahead of the company. I don't care. You should care. This is your father's company. And you're—" Victoria stopped, took a breath. "You've become important to me. You and Emma both. I'm not throwing that away because Sebastian Ward is threatened by the idea of a CEO who gives a damn about people." They stood there in the hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of both their reputations, and Ethan realized something. He'd been wrong. About corporate environments, about people in power, about whether anyone could be trusted in this world. Because Victoria Hale was standing in front of him, willing to sacrifice everything she'd built just to protect him. "I can't let you do that," Ethan said quietly. "Too bad. You don't get a vote." "Yes, I do." He pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm going to fix this, but I need you to trust me." "What are you going to do?" "Something I should have done 5 years ago." Ethan pulled up a contact he hadn't called in years. "I'm going to fight back." The name in Ethan's contacts was David Chen. Not related to Mark, this David was an investigative journalist who'd covered the lawsuit against Ethan's former employer 5 years ago. Back when Ethan still believed the legal system worked, back when he thought truth mattered more than money. The call went to voicemail. Ethan left a message. "David, it's Ethan Cole. I know it's been a long time, but I need your help. I have a story for you. A real one this time." He hung up and looked at Victoria. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What did you just do?" "I'm going to tell him everything. About Sebastian, about the cyber attack, about what really happened 5 years ago with my old company." Ethan's voice was steady. "The NDA I signed prevents me from suing, but it doesn't prevent me from talking to journalists. I should have done it years ago." "Ethan, if you break that agreement—" "What are they going to do? Sue me? I have nothing left to take." He met her eyes. "But Sebastian does. And if we're going down, we're taking him with us." Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression hardened. "The board is calling another emergency meeting. Tonight. Sebastian's pushing for a vote on your termination. Then fire me. Make it clean." "I already told you." "Victoria." Ethan grabbed her hand. "Listen to me. If you fight this, they'll remove you too. Sebastian wins either way. But if you let me go quietly, you stay in control. You can still stop him from the inside." "I don't want to do this from the inside. I want—" She stopped herself. "What?" Victoria looked at their hands, still clasped together. "I want to tell them all to go to hell. I want to walk out of here with you and Emma and never look back." The honesty of it hit Ethan like a physical blow. He realized his thumb was tracing small circles on the back of her hand. He didn't remember starting that. "You can't," he said quietly. Your father built this company. You owe it to him to save it. My father's gone, and I'm tired of sacrificing everything for people who wouldn't do the same for me. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. David Chen. I need to take this. Victoria nodded and pulled her hand away, leaving Ethan's skin feeling cold where she'd been. He answered. David! Ethan Cole, man, I thought you disappeared off the face of the earth. David's voice was exactly as Ethan remembered, sharp, cynical, perpetually amused by the world's corruption. What have you got for me? How fast can you get to New York? 2 hours later, Ethan sat across from David in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Hale Dynamics. He'd brought every piece of evidence he had, the cyber attack traces, Sebastian's digital fingerprints, even the old files from his lawsuit 5 years ago. David spread it all across the table like a detective examining crime scene photos. Holy hell, he muttered. This is massive. If even half of this holds up, it all holds up. I wouldn't have called you otherwise. And you're willing to go on record about all of it? Ethan thought about Emma, about the reporters outside his apartment, about the way Victoria had looked when she said she wanted to walk away from everything. Yeah, I'm willing. David grinned. It wasn't a nice grin. It was the grin of someone who'd just found a story that would win awards. Give me 72 hours. I need to verify sources, get statements, make sure our legal team signs off. But Ethan, this is going to blow up. You understand that, right? Once this goes public, your life gets messy again. My life's already messy. Fair point. David started packing up the documents. One more thing. The CEO, Victoria Hale. What's her involvement in this? She's the target. Sebastian's trying to force her out. And your relationship with her? Ethan's jaw tightened. Professional. The photos say otherwise. The photos show her being a decent human being to a single father and his kid. That's it. David held up his hands. Hey, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, if there's more to this story, I need to know now, before it comes out later and makes both of us look like idiots. Ethan thought about Victoria sitting on his floor building blanket forts, about her laugh when Emma declared her Lady Star of the Dragon Kingdom, about the way she'd shown up at the hospital without being asked and stayed without being thanked. There's nothing to know, he lied. David looked at him for a long moment, then shrugged. All right, I'll be in touch. After David left, Ethan sat alone in the coffee shop and stared at his cold coffee. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Martinez. Mrs. M. Emma, home safe, made her favorite snack. Reporters still outside, but we came in through garage. Ethan. Thank you. I'll be there soon. Mrs. M. Take your time. She's drawing. She made one of you as a superhero. Ethan smiled despite everything. Of course she did. Another text came through, this one from Victoria. Victoria. Board meeting in 1 hour. I'm going to fight for you. Ethan. Don't. Let me go. It's cleaner. Victoria. I don't want clean. I want right. Ethan. Sometimes they're not the same thing. Victoria. Then I'll settle for right. Ethan typed out a response 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Finally, he just wrote, Ethan. Thank you. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Martinez's apartment an hour later. His daughter launched herself at him like he'd been gone for weeks instead of hours. Daddy, I drew you fighting a dragon. You win because you have a magic wrench. A magic wrench. That's pretty powerful. The most powerful. Emma grabbed his hand. Can Victoria come for dinner? I want to show her. Ethan's chest ached. Not tonight, sweetheart. She's busy with work. Is she in trouble? Like when I got in trouble for drawing on the wall? Something like that. But she didn't mean to be bad, right? It was an accident. Ethan knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. Victoria's not bad at all, Em. Sometimes people just get blamed for things that aren't their fault. Emma considered this seriously. That's not fair. No, it's not. Then we should help her, like she helped us. Out of the mouths of children. Ethan pulled Emma into a hug and held her tight. That night, after Emma fell asleep clutching her dragon drawings, Ethan's phone rang. Victoria. How bad was it? He asked. Bad. Victoria's voice was hoarse, like she'd been yelling. Sebastian presented a motion to terminate your employment with cause. Breach of ethics, inappropriate relationships, compromising company integrity. Did it pass? I vetoed it. Ethan closed his eyes. Victoria. The board voted to override my veto, 7-4. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Turns out I have less power than I thought. I'm sorry. Don't be. This isn't over. Sebastian made a mistake tonight. He showed his hand too early. Some of the board members are starting to ask questions about the timing, about how the press got those photos. She paused. I think we can still salvage this. We? Yes, we. I'm not letting you fight this alone. Ethan sat in his dark living room and tried to find the right words. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Silence stretched between them. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. Because you're the first person in 5 years who's made me remember what it feels like to care about something other than quarterly earnings and board approval. Another pause. And because Emma drew me wearing a crown and called me important, and I can't remember the last time someone thought I was important for reasons that had nothing to do with money or power. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only thing he could. You are important, to both of us. Ethan, I should go. Emma's appointment is early tomorrow. The pre-surgical consultation. Do you want me there? Yes, the answer came so quickly it startled him. You don't have to. That's not what I asked. Then yes, I want you there. I'll pick you up at 7. She hung up before he could argue. The next morning, Victoria showed up at 6:55 a.m. with coffee and a bag of Emma's favorite breakfast sandwiches. She was wearing jeans instead of a suit, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Ethan had never seen her look more beautiful. Emma was thrilled. She chattered the entire drive to the hospital, showing Victoria her collection of dragon drawings, and explaining in elaborate detail the hierarchy of the Dragon Kingdom. Sir Toolbox is the bravest because he fixes things when they're broken, and Lady Star is the wisest because she knows about important stuff. And I'm Princess Sparklefire because I have 17 legs and can breathe purple flames. That's an excellent power, Victoria said seriously. I know, right? At the hospital, the pre-surgical consultation was thorough and terrifying. Dr. Lawson walked them through every step of the procedure, every possible complication, every percentage of risk. Ethan listened and tried to keep his face neutral while his entire world narrowed to numbers and medical terminology. 87% success rate for this specific procedure. 13% chance of complications. 2% chance of... He couldn't finish that thought. Emma sat between him and Victoria, swinging her legs and coloring while the adults talked. She didn't understand most of what was being said, didn't realize that the doctors were discussing cutting open her chest and touching her heart. Ethan was grateful for that. After the consultation, Dr. Lawson pulled Ethan aside while Victoria distracted Emma with the aquarium in the waiting room. Mr. Cole, I want you to understand something. Emma's case is serious, but it's not hopeless. We do these surgeries regularly. The team here is excellent. But there's still risk. There's always risk. But doing nothing is also a risk, a bigger one. Dr. Lawson's eyes were kind. Your daughter is strong, stronger than most kids her age. She's going to get through this. How do you know it? Because she has you, and that woman out there with her. Dr. Lawson nodded toward the waiting room where Victoria was making fish faces at Emma through the aquarium glass, making her giggle. Kids do better when they know they're loved. Emma knows. Ethan's throat felt tight. Thank you. In the car on the way home, Emma fell asleep in her booster seat, exhausted from the appointment. Ethan and Victoria drove in silence for several blocks. Then Victoria said, I'm scared. It was such an honest admission that Ethan didn't know how to respond at first. Me too, he finally said. What if something goes wrong? Then we deal with it, together. Victoria's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't know how to do this. Be there for people. Care about them. I spent so long building walls. You're doing fine. Am I? Because I feel like I'm stumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out how to be a human being instead of a CEO. Ethan looked at her profile. The sharp jawline, the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept blinking like she was fighting tears. You brought breakfast sandwiches at 6:55 a.m., he said. You made fish faces at a 6-year-old. You're here, in this car, when you could be at the office fighting for your company. He paused. You're not stumbling. You're just learning how to be yourself again. Victoria pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, turned to look at him. I don't want to lose this, she said. Whatever this is, I don't want to go back to the way things were before. Then don't. It's not that simple. Sebastian's not going to stop. The board is turning against me. And once David's story breaks, she stopped. Everything's going to get worse before it gets better. I know. So what do we do? Ethan reached over and took her hand. We do what we've been doing. We show up. We take care of Emma. We fight back when we need to. And we trust that it's enough. Victoria looked down at their joined hands. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just too tired to pretend anymore. They sat there for a long moment, parked on the side of the road with Emma sleeping peacefully in the back seat and the rest of the world falling apart around them. Then Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. It's the FBI. What? The FBI is calling me, she answered. This is Victoria Hale. Ethan couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he watched Victoria's expression shift from confusion to shock, to something that looked like grim satisfaction. Yes, I understand. Tomorrow morning, I'll have my attorney present. Thank you. She hung up. What was that? Ethan asked. The FBI wants to interview me about the cyber attack. Apparently, they've been investigating Sebastian Ward for securities fraud for the past 6 months. Victoria's hands were shaking. They already have evidence. They just needed proof he was actively trying to manipulate the company. And the cyber attack gave them that proof. Yes, Victoria started laughing, actual genuine laughter mixed with something that might have been tears. We got him. That bastard finally got caught. Don't celebrate yet. He still has lawyers. He still has connections. I know, but it's something. Victoria wiped her eyes. It's more than we had this morning. They drove the rest of the way to Ethan's apartment in a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. When they arrived, Emma woke up and immediately wanted Victoria to come inside and see her newest dragon drawing. I really should get back to the office, Victoria said, but she was already unbuckling her seatbelt. Inside the apartment, Emma pulled out every drawing she'd made in the past week and laid them across the floor like an art gallery opening. This one's you fighting a sea monster. This one's you and Daddy getting married. Emma, Ethan interrupted, feeling his face heat up. What? Dragons get married all the time. It's very normal in the dragon kingdom. Victoria was trying not to laugh. Failing. And this one's all of us at my surgery. See? I'm sleeping, and you're holding Daddy's hand because he's scared of hospitals. The drawing showed 3 stick figures standing around a bed. The details were crude, but somehow perfect. Victoria with her crown, Ethan with his toolbox, Emma with 17 purple legs, even while lying down. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Ethan said quietly. I know. Emma looked up at them with those big, trusting eyes. Victoria's going to be there, right? At the real surgery? Victoria knelt down beside Emma. Do you want me there? Duh. You're Lady Star. You have to be there. Then I'll be there, I promise. Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Good. Because you're family now. Over Emma's shoulder, Victoria met Ethan's eyes. There was something in her expression that made his chest ache. Hope and fear and longing all mixed together. He understood, because he felt it too. After Emma went to bed that night, Victoria stayed. They sat on the couch with 2 glasses of cheap wine and the comfortable silence that comes from being too exhausted to maintain pretenses. I have to testify, Victoria said finally, at the FBI interview tomorrow. They're going to ask about my relationship with you. Tell them the truth. Which is? Ethan looked at her. What do you think it is? I think... Victoria stopped, started again. I think you and Emma walked into my life when I'd forgotten what it felt like to be human. I think I care about you both more than I've cared about anything in years. I think if I had to choose between saving my company and protecting you two, I wouldn't even hesitate. Victoria, I'm not finished. She set down her wine glass. I think I've been lying to myself for weeks, pretending this was just friendship, pretending I was just being helpful. But the truth is, I look forward to coming here more than anything else in my life. The truth is, when Emma calls me family, I want it to be real. Ethan's heart was hammering against his ribs. The truth is, I'm terrified. Of what? Of how much I want this. Of how badly it could hurt if it doesn't work. He took a breath. I've been alone for so long. I've protected Emma from letting people get close because I couldn't risk her getting hurt again, but then you showed up and you make me want to risk it anyway. Victoria moved closer, close enough that Ethan could count the flecks of gold in her eyes. So risk it, she whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't perfect. Their noses bumped. Victoria's hand got tangled in his hair. They both pulled back at the same time, then laughed nervously and tried again. The second attempt was better, softer, the kind of kiss that tasted like possibility and fear and hope all at once. When they finally broke apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. That was... Yeah, Ethan agreed. They sat there, holding each other, while the apartment creaked around them and the city hummed outside the window. Then Emma's voice called from the bedroom. "Daddy, I had a bad dream!" Reality crashed back. Ethan pulled away, already moving toward the bedroom. "I should go anyway," Victoria said, standing and collecting her things. "Big day tomorrow." "Victoria." She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "We'll figure this out. All of it. I promise." After she left, Ethan climbed into bed with Emma and held her while she told him about her dream, something involving dragons and hospitals and monsters that lived in medical equipment. "But then Lady Star came and scared the monsters away," Emma finished, "because she's brave and she loves us." "She does," Ethan said, realizing it was true. "Do you love her too, Daddy?" The question should have been harder to answer. Instead, it was the easiest thing in the world. "Yeah, Em, I do." "Good." Emma snuggled closer. "Then she can be part of our family for real, not just pretend dragon family." "Maybe, if she wants to be." "She wants to be. I can tell." Emma yawned. "Dragons always know about love stuff." Ethan smiled and kissed the top of her head. "Then I guess it must be true." The next morning, Victoria's FBI interview lasted 4 hours. Ethan knew because he watched the clock the entire time, unable to focus on anything else. When she finally called, she sounded exhausted but triumphant. "They have everything. Bank records, emails, testimony from other board members Sebastian pressured. He's done." "That's good. That's really good." "There's more. They're also investigating the leak to the press. Turns out Sebastian paid a private investigator to follow us, take those photos. That's witness tampering, obstruction. The prosecutor thinks they can make a dozen charges stick." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "So it's over." "Not yet, but soon." Victoria paused. "There's going to be another board meeting tonight. Emergency session. Sebastian doesn't know about the FBI yet, but word is getting out. Some of the board members are getting nervous." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to end this one way or another." That night, Ethan put Emma to bed early and then sat on the couch refreshing news sites every 30 seconds. At 8:47 p.m., the first headline appeared. "Breaking. FBI investigating Hale Dynamics board member for securities fraud." At 9:15, another update. Sebastian Ward arrested at emergency board meeting, and at 9:33, David Chen's story went live. The corporate coup that failed. How one engineer exposed corruption at the highest levels. Ethan read it 3 times. David had included everything. The cyber attack, the stolen engineering work from 5 years ago, Victoria's fight to protect her employees against a corrupt board member. The story painted Victoria as a hero and Sebastian as a villain, which Ethan supposed was close enough to the truth. His phone rang at 10:02. "Did you see?" Victoria asked. She sounded breathless. "I saw. Are you okay?" "He's gone, Ethan. The board voted unanimously to remove him. The FBI arrested him in the conference room. He actually tried to run." She laughed, slightly hysterical. "A 63-year-old man in a 3-piece suit tried to run from federal agents." Victoria. I know I should be professional about this, but I just watched my father's oldest friend get arrested for trying to destroy everything we built, and I can't. Where are you?" "Still at the office." "Stay there. I'm coming." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He called Mrs. Martinez, who arrived within 15 minutes to watch Emma. Then Ethan took a cab to Hale Dynamics. The office building was mostly empty at this hour. Ethan found Victoria in her office, standing at the window overlooking the city. She didn't turn when he entered. "My father trusted him," she said quietly. "For 30 years he trusted Sebastian. They built this company together. And the whole time, Sebastian was just waiting for a chance to take it all. Ethan crossed the room and put his arms around her from behind. Victoria leaned back into him, her shoulders shaking. "I'm so angry," she whispered, "and so tired, and I don't know how to feel about any of this." "Then don't. Not tonight. Just breathe." They stood there for a long time, wrapped around each other, while the city lights glittered below and the weight of the day slowly settled into something manageable. Finally, Victoria turned in his arms. "Thank you for coming. Always." She kissed him. This time it wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was desperate and grateful and full of everything they'd been holding back. When they broke apart, Victoria rested her head against his chest. "I meant what I said last night, about choosing you and Emma over the company. I know. The board wants me to stay on as CEO, clean up Sebastian's mess, restore investor confidence." She pulled back to look at him. "But I don't know if that's what I want anymore." "What do you want?" "Honestly, I want to build blanket forts with Emma. I want to have dinner at your apartment every night. I want to stop measuring my life in profit margins and start measuring it in moon cookies and dragon drawings and moments that actually matter." Ethan's throat felt tight. "You can have both, the company and us." "Can I?" "Because right now it feels like I have to choose." "Then choose later, after Emma's surgery, after things settle down." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to figure everything out tonight." Victoria smiled, tired but genuine. "When did you become the reasonable one?" "About 5 minutes ago. Don't get used to it." They left the office together, hands linked, and walked out into the cool night air. In 3 weeks, Emma would have open-heart surgery. In 3 days, Sebastian Ward would be formally charged with multiple felonies. Tomorrow, the press would probably dig up more dirt, ask more questions, make more assumptions. But tonight, for just a few hours, Ethan and Victoria let themselves believe that everything was going to be okay. Because sometimes, that's all you can do. Believe and hold on to the people who make you want to try. The weeks before Emma's surgery moved both too fast and too slow. Ethan felt like he was living in 2 different timelines, one where every day dragged with anxiety, and another where time kept slipping through his fingers like water. Victoria had practically moved into the apartment. She never officially said she was staying, but her toothbrush appeared in the bathroom. Her laptop took up permanent residence on the kitchen table. Her coat hung next to Ethan's by the door. Emma didn't question it. To her, this was just how things were supposed to be. The 3 of them together, making breakfast and doing homework and building increasingly elaborate dragon kingdoms out of couch cushions. "Lady Star needs a castle," Emma announced one evening, 2 weeks before the surgery. "A big one with towers." "How many towers?" Victoria asked, already stacking pillows. "At least 12, maybe 15. 15 towers seems excessive for one dragon. Lady Star is a very important dragon. She needs excessive towers." Ethan watched them from the kitchen, where he was supposed to be making dinner but had gotten distracted. Victoria was wearing one of his old sweatshirts. It was too big on her, the sleeves hanging past her hands, and she looked happier than he'd ever seen her in any business suit. "Daddy, stop staring and help. I'm cooking. You're not doing anything. The water isn't even boiling yet." Emma was right. Ethan turned back to the stove and tried to focus on pasta, instead of the fact that his entire life had shifted into something he didn't recognize anymore. Something better. Something that terrified him. Later that night, after Emma fell asleep in her castle of 15 pillows, Victoria and Ethan sat on the couch with the lights low and a bottle of wine neither of them was really drinking. "The board finalized the restructuring plan today," Victoria said. "They want me to announce it next week." "What kind of restructuring?" "The kind where we actually start acting like we care about employees instead of just stock prices. Better benefits, higher wages, profit sharing for long-term staff." She paused. "Your idea about flexible work schedules for parents? We're implementing that across all departments." Ethan looked at her. "You're serious?" "Completely. Sebastian ran this company like people were disposable. I'm going to run it like they're human beings." She took a sip of wine. "My father would have wanted that. I think he tried, but Sebastian was always in his ear talking about margins and efficiency and shareholder value." "Your father would be proud of you. Would he?" Victoria's voice was quiet. "I'm not sure. I spent so many years trying to be what he needed me to be, the perfect CEO, the perfect daughter, the perfect representation of his legacy. I don't know if he ever knew the real me." Ethan took her hand. I think he knew you better than you think. How can you say that? You never met him.
Because
Because he raised someone who showed up at a hospital for a stranger's kid, who built blanket forts on a work night, who was willing to sacrifice everything to protect people she barely knew. Ethan squeezed her hand. That doesn't come from nowhere. He must have taught you that. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I miss him. I know. And I'm terrified that I'm going to mess this all up. The company, us, Emma. You're not going to mess it up. You don't know that. No, Ethan agreed, but I know you're going to try your best. And I know that's enough. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. What if it's not? What if Emma's surgery doesn't... She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan couldn't either, because thinking about the alternative made his chest feel like it was caving in. Then we deal with it, he said finally. Together. Together, Victoria repeated, like she was testing the word. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime rhythm, sirens in the distance, voices from the street below, the constant low rumble of traffic. I've been thinking about something, Victoria said eventually. What? After Emma's surgery, after she recovers, I want to step back from the CEO role. Ethan pulled back to look at her. What? Not completely. I'd stay on the board, help with major decisions, but day-to-day operations? I want to hire someone else to handle that. She met his eyes. I want a life, Ethan. A real one. Not just conference calls and board meetings and 16-hour days. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Victoria's voice was steady. My father built that company, but he also died at 63 with a stress-induced heart attack. I don't want to follow in those footsteps. I want to follow in yours, prioritizing what actually matters. Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just pulled her close and held her while the weight of her decision settled between them. The week before the surgery was chaos. David Chen's article had sparked a media firestorm. Every business publication wanted an interview with Victoria. The FBI investigation into Sebastian was expanding. Apparently his corruption went deeper than anyone had realized, involving shell companies and offshore accounts and fraud that dated back years. 3 more board members resigned. 2 executives were placed on leave pending internal investigation. The company's stock took a hit, then recovered, then fluctuated wildly as investors tried to figure out what was happening. Through it all, Victoria handled it with a calm that Ethan found remarkable. She did interviews, made statements, reassured investors, all while still showing up at the apartment every evening to help Emma with homework and build dragon castles. How are you doing this? Ethan asked one night after Emma went to bed. How are you keeping it together? I'm not. Victoria looked exhausted. I'm barely sleeping. I had a panic attack in my car yesterday. I snapped at 3 people in meetings who didn't deserve it. She paused. But then I come here and Emma shows me her drawings, and you make me laugh, and suddenly I remember why I'm doing any of this. We're your escape. You're my anchor, she corrected him. There's a difference. 2 days before the surgery, Emma asked the question Ethan had been dreading. Daddy, what if I don't wake up? They were sitting at the kitchen table. Emma was supposed to be coloring, but her crayons lay untouched while she stared at a blank piece of paper. Ethan's heart stopped. What? After the surgery, the doctor said I have to go to sleep. What if I don't wake up? Ethan knelt beside her chair, eye level with his daughter. You're going to wake up, sweetheart. But what if I don't? Madison at school said her grandpa had surgery and he died. She said sometimes people go to sleep and don't come back. Ethan was going to have words with Madison's parents, strong words. Emma, listen to me. You have the best doctors in the country. They've done this surgery hundreds of times. You're strong and healthy, and you're going to be fine. But you don't know that for sure. No, he didn't, and lying to her felt wrong. You're right, Ethan said slowly. I can't promise nothing will go wrong. Nobody can. But I can promise that everyone, me, Victoria, all the doctors and nurses, we're all going to do everything possible to make sure you're safe. Emma's bottom lip trembled. I'm scared, Daddy. I know, baby. I'm scared too. You are? Terrified. But being scared is okay. It means you understand what's happening, and understanding things is important. Emma thought about this. Victoria's scared too? Probably. Want to ask her? Victoria had been in the other room, supposedly answering emails. But when Ethan called her, she appeared immediately, like she'd been listening the whole time. Emma looked up at her. Are you scared about my surgery? Victoria didn't hesitate. Yes? Really? Really, I'm so scared that I can barely sleep. I keep thinking about all the things that could happen, and it makes me feel sick. Then how do you stop being scared? Victoria sat down at the table. I don't. I just try to remember that being scared means I love you, and loving you is worth being scared. Emma considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could manage. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Besides, Victoria continued, pulling out a piece of paper, I made something for you, for after the surgery. She unfolded a drawing clearly drawn by an adult, but in the style of Emma's dragon pictures. It showed 3 dragons standing together. Princess Sparklefire in the middle with 17 purple legs, Sir Toolbox on one side with his magic wrench, Lady Star on the other with her crown. This is us, Victoria explained, after you're all better. We're going to celebrate by going to the park and eating ice cream and having a dragon parade. Emma's eyes went wide. A dragon parade? The biggest one ever, with banners and music, and everyone has to roar at least once. At least twice, Emma corrected. You're right. At least twice. Emma took the drawing and stared at it like it was precious. Can I keep this? For when I'm in the hospital? It's yours. I drew it special. Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Thank you, Lady Star. Over Emma's shoulder, Victoria met Ethan's eyes. Her expression was fierce and protective and terrified all at once. He understood, because he felt exactly the same way. The night before the surgery, none of them slept much. Emma was restless, getting up every hour with a new worry or question. Ethan and Victoria took turns sitting with her, reading stories, singing off-key lullabies, making promises they desperately hoped they could keep. At 2 a.m., Ethan found Victoria standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. You should try to sleep, he said. Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I just see... She stopped. How do you do this? How do you survive being this terrified for another person? You just do, because the alternative is not loving them, and that's worse. Victoria turned to face him. In the dim kitchen light, she looked young and vulnerable and nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. I love her, Victoria said quietly. Is that crazy? I've only known her a few months, but I love her like she's mine. It's not crazy. And I love you. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back. I know we haven't talked about it. I know the timing is terrible, but I need you to know, before tomorrow, just in case. Ethan crossed the kitchen and kissed her, hard and desperate, and full of every emotion he'd been trying to contain. I love you too, he said against her lips. I think I started loving you on that plane when you were drooling on my shoulder and I had bruises forming and I thought, this woman is going to change my life. Victoria laughed, a wet sound that might have been tears. I wasn't drooling. You were definitely drooling. I was exhausted and grieving and beautiful and broken and trying so hard to hold it together. Ethan cupped her face. Just like you are right now. I don't know how to do this. How to be this vulnerable. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. They held each other in the dark kitchen while the hours ticked toward dawn and everything they couldn't control waited just ahead. At 4:30 a.m., Emma padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, dragging her favorite blanket. Can't sleep, she announced. Neither can we, Ethan admitted. Emma climbed onto Victoria's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Can we watch the sunrise? Please? So the 3 of them sat together at the window, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to the pale gold of early morning. Emma fell asleep against Victoria's chest somewhere around 5:15. Victoria held her carefully, like she was made of glass, and Ethan sat beside them with his arm around both of them. Whatever happens today, Victoria whispered, I want you to know this has been the best few months of my life. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Mine too. The hospital was cold and bright and smelled like antiseptic. Emma was quiet during check-in, holding tight to both Ethan and Victoria's hands. The pre-op nurse was kind, explaining each step in a gentle voice, letting Emma pick which color IV tape she wanted. Purple, Emma decided, for dragons. Dr. Lawson came by to review everything one last time. She knelt beside Emma's hospital bed. You ready, brave girl? Emma shook her head. I'm scared. That's okay. Being scared is normal, but you know what? You're stronger than you think, and when you wake up, your heart is going to work so much better. You'll be able to run and play without getting tired. Will it hurt? A little bit, yeah, but we'll give you medicine to help, and your dad and Victoria will be right here waiting. Emma looked at Ethan. Promise? Promise. I'm not going anywhere. And Victoria? Victoria's voice was thick. I promise too. When they wheeled Emma away, she was clutching the drawing Victoria had made, 3 dragons standing together. See you soon, Princess Sparklefire, Victoria called after her. Emma managed a small smile. See you soon, Lady Star. Then she was gone, and Ethan and Victoria were left standing in an empty hallway with nothing to do but wait. The surgery was supposed to take 4 hours. They went to the family waiting room, a space designed to be comforting but just felt sterile and sad. Other families sat in clusters, some crying, some staring at phones, some just holding each other. Ethan couldn't sit still. He paced. He got coffee he didn't drink. He checked his phone every 30 seconds, even though he knew they wouldn't call until there was news. Victoria sat in a chair by the window, perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. But Ethan could see the tension in every line of her body. After an hour, he sat down beside her. Talk to me, he said. About what? Anything. I need a distraction. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, When I was Emma's age, I had to have my appendix out. Emergency surgery, middle of the night. I was terrified. What happened? My father stayed with me the whole time. Before they took me back, he told me a story about a princess who had to slay a dragon. Except the dragon wasn't evil. It was just sick. And the princess was the only one brave enough to help it. She paused. He said I was like that princess, brave enough to face scary things. Were you? I threw up on the nurse's shoes, so debatable. Victoria's smile was small. But the story helped. It made me feel like I wasn't just a scared kid. I was a warrior. Ethan took her hand. Emma's a warrior too. I know. But she shouldn't have to be. She's 6 years old. She should be worried about homework and playground drama, not open-heart surgery. No, she shouldn't. But she is, and we can't change that. All we can do is be here when she wakes up. When? Not if. When, Ethan confirmed, even though his own fear was eating him alive. 2 hours became 3. 3 became 4. At the 4.5-hour mark, Ethan's phone finally rang. Dr. Lawson's name on the screen. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped the phone. Hello? Mr. Cole, the surgery went well. Emma's in recovery now. She did great. The relief hit so hard that Ethan's knees buckled. Victoria caught him, her own face a mixture of hope and terror. She's okay? Ethan managed to ask. She's okay. The repair was successful. No complications. She's still sedated, but her vitals are strong. Can we see her? Give us about 30 minutes to get her settled in the ICU. Then, yes, a nurse will come get you. After Dr. Lawson hung up, Ethan turned to Victoria and said, She's okay. And then he started crying. Victoria held him while he fell apart. This strong, capable woman who'd walked into his life on a turbulent flight and somehow become his entire world. She's okay, Victoria kept repeating, like a prayer. She's okay, she's okay, she's okay. When the nurse finally came to take them back, they followed her through a maze of hallways to the pediatric ICU. Emma looked so small in the hospital bed. She was still unconscious, hooked up to monitors and IVs and machines that beeped and whirred, but her chest was rising and falling steadily. Her face was peaceful. Ethan took one of her small hands. Victoria took the other. Hey, sweetheart, Ethan whispered. You did it. You're so brave. So brave. Emma didn't respond, but her fingers twitched slightly in his grip. We're right here, Victoria added softly. Just like we promised, and we're not leaving. They sat like that for hours, holding Emma's hands, watching her breathe, letting the reality sink in that she was alive and safe, and going to be okay. Around hour 3, Emma started to wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and disoriented. She made a small sound of distress. Hey, it's okay, Ethan said immediately. You're okay, Em. The surgery's over. You did amazing. Emma's eyes focused on him. then on Victoria. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry from the breathing tube. "Don't talk yet," Victoria said, grabbing a cup of ice chips the nurse had left. "Here. Small bites." Emma took the ice gratefully. After a moment, she managed to croak out, "Hurts." "I know, baby. The nurse is going to bring more medicine soon. It'll help." "Did it work?" "Yes, your heart's all fixed. You're going to feel so much better once you heal." Emma's eyes were already drooping again, the exhaustion and medication pulling her back under. But before she fell asleep, she mumbled, "Told you Lady Star would keep me safe." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Always, Princess Sparklefire. Always." Emma slept. Ethan and Victoria kept their vigil. At some point, a nurse brought them blankets. At another point, someone brought food they didn't eat. The hours blurred together in the dim ICU lighting and the steady rhythm of monitors. Just before midnight, Victoria fell asleep in her chair, her hand still holding Emma's. Ethan watched them, these two people who'd become his whole world, and felt something shift inside his chest. He'd spent 5 years believing he was better off alone, safer, more in control. But looking at Victoria's exhausted face and Emma's peaceful sleeping one, Ethan realized he'd been wrong. This was better. This terrifying, complicated, beautiful mess of loving people and letting them love you back. This was worth every risk. Emma stayed in the ICU for 3 days before being moved to a regular room. Each day she got a little stronger, a little more like herself. By day 4, she was complaining about the hospital food and demanding her dragon drawings. By day 5, she was bossing around the nurses and insisting that Victoria tell her stories about the Dragon Kingdom. By day 7, Dr. Lawson said they could go home. "I want to be clear," the doctor said, addressing all 3 of them. "Emma's going to need several weeks of recovery, no strenuous activity, lots of rest. But the surgery was a complete success. Her heart function is already improving." "And long term?" Ethan asked. "She'll need regular checkups, but there's no reason she can't live a completely normal life. Play sports, run around, do all the things she couldn't do before." Emma looked up at Ethan with wide eyes. "I can really run? Like, run, not just slow running?" "Really run," Dr. Lawson confirmed with a smile. "Can I try now?" "Absolutely not," Ethan, Victoria, and Dr. Lawson said in unison. Emma pouted, but she was smiling. The drive home felt surreal. Emma sat in her booster seat, talking nonstop about all the things she wanted to do once she was better. Victoria drove carefully, glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds to check on Emma. Ethan sat in the passenger seat and tried to process the fact that they'd made it through the hardest part. When they arrived at the apartment, Mrs. Martinez was waiting with a welcome home banner and enough food to feed an army. "I made everything," she announced, hugging Emma gently. "Soup, casseroles, cookies, you name it, it's in your freezer." "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said. "Of course I did. Your family." Emma was delighted by the banner and the food and the fact that she got to sleep in her own bed again, but by 7 p.m., she was exhausted and ready for sleep. Ethan tucked her in, making sure all her favorite stuffed animals were arranged just right. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Today was a good day." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, it really was." "Is Victoria staying?" "For tonight, yes." "Forever?" Ethan looked down at his daughter, brave, resilient, hopeful Emma, who just survived open-heart surgery and was already thinking about the future. "I hope so," he said honestly. "Me too. I love her." "I know, so do I." Emma smiled and closed her eyes. "Good. Then we can be a real family, not just pretend." After Emma fell asleep, Ethan found Victoria standing on the small balcony outside the apartment. The city stretched out below them, all lights and noise and endless movement. "She asked if you're staying forever," Ethan said, joining her. "What did you say?" "That I hoped so." Victoria turned to look at him. "And do you hope so?" "More than I've hoped for anything in a long time. Even though it's complicated, even though we come with all this baggage and trauma, and especially because of that," Ethan pulled her close. "I don't want easy, Victoria. I want real. And this, us, it's the most real thing I've ever had." Victoria kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I'm staying," she said, "if you'll have me. Always." They stood together on the balcony, holding each other while the city hummed around them and Emma slept peacefully inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Victoria still had a company to restructure. Ethan still had work to figure out. Emma still had weeks of recovery ahead. But tonight, for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, everything felt right. Not perfect, not easy, but right. And that was enough. The first 2 weeks after Emma came home were harder than the surgery itself. Not physically. Emma was healing well, her incision site clean and her energy slowly returning. But emotionally, all three of them were wrecked. Emma had nightmares. She'd wake up crying, convinced she was back in the hospital, and it would take both Ethan and Victoria 20 minutes to calm her down. During the day, she was clingy and anxious, afraid to let either of them out of her sight for more than a few minutes. Ethan barely slept. Every sound from Emma's room sent him bolting upright, checking to make sure she was breathing, that her color looked right, that nothing had gone wrong while he wasn't watching. And Victoria was trying to run a company in crisis mode while basically living in Ethan's apartment and functioning on 3 hours of sleep a night. Something had to give. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 2.5 weeks post-surgery. Ethan was making breakfast when Victoria emerged from the bedroom wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she might fall over. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. "Couple hours. Had to join a conference call with Tokyo at 3 a.m. She poured coffee with shaking hands. "2 board members resigned yesterday. The restructuring is taking longer than expected, and the press won't stop calling." "You need to take a break." "I can't. There's too much." "Victoria." Ethan took the coffee cup from her hands and set it down. "You're running yourself into the ground. This isn't sustainable." "I know, but what am I supposed to do? The company needs me. Emma needs me. You need me. We need you healthy, not collapsed from exhaustion." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do this. How to be everything to everyone. I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I'm failing at all of it." Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. "Are you fighting?" "No, sweetheart," Ethan said quickly. "We're just talking." "It sounds like fighting." Emma's voice was small. "Are you mad at Victoria?" "Nobody's mad at anyone," Victoria said, wiping her eyes and trying to smile. "I'm just tired." Emma walked over and took Victoria's hand. "You should take a nap. Daddy says naps fix everything." "Does he?" "Well, not everything. They don't fix broken legs or scary dreams, but they fix tired." Despite everything, Victoria laughed. "You're very wise, Princess Sparklefire." "I know. It's because I have 17 legs. More legs means more wisdom." After Emma went back to her room to draw, Ethan pulled Victoria onto the couch. "She's right. You need rest, real rest, not just a couple hours between conference calls." "And the company?" "Will survive a few days without you. You've spent the last month putting systems in place. Trust them to work." Victoria leaned against him, exhausted. "I'm scared that if I stop moving, I'll fall apart completely." "Then fall apart. I'll be here to help put you back together." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm going to do it. Step back from the CEO position. Not someday. Now. I'm going to announce it this week." "Are you sure?" "No. But I'm doing it anyway." Victoria sat up and looked at him. "My father spent his whole life building that company, and it killed him. I'm not making the same mistake. Emma almost died, Ethan, and I realized that if something had happened to her, if I'd lost her because I was too busy with board meetings and restructuring plans," her voice broke, "I can't live like that anymore." "Okay, then we'll figure it out. Together." "Together," Victoria repeated. "I'm still getting used to that word meaning something real." 3 days later, Victoria called an emergency board meeting. She didn't tell Ethan what she was planning to say, just kissed him and Emma goodbye and headed to the office with a kind of determined calm that made Ethan nervous. He spent the morning trying to distract Emma with coloring books and cartoons, but mostly he just watched the clock. At 11:47 a.m., his phone rang. "Victoria." "How'd it go?" "I resigned." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What?" "As CEO. I'm staying on the board, but I recommended Elena Vasquez for the CEO position. She's been VP of Operations for 6 years. She's brilliant, and the board loves her. They approved it unanimously." "Victoria, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years." Her voice was lighter than he'd heard it in weeks. "I'm coming home." "Well, to your apartment." "Which I guess is kind of home now." "It is home. For as long as you want." "Good. Because I have plans, and they involve building the biggest blanket fort Emma's ever seen. She showed up an hour later with 36 pillows, 2 packages of fairy lights, and enough blankets to stock a small hotel. Emma's eyes went wide. What's all this? Castle supplies, Victoria announced. I made a promise about a dragon parade once Emma was all healed up, but I figured we should start with a proper dragon palace first. The biggest one ever? The absolute biggest. They spent the entire afternoon building. By dinner time, the living room had been transformed into an elaborate fortress of pillows and blankets and twinkling lights. Emma declared it the official headquarters of the Dragon Kingdom and immediately made Victoria and Ethan sign a construction paper treaty pledging their loyalty. This is legally binding, Emma said seriously, having no idea what legally binding meant. Understood, Your Highness, Victoria replied with equal seriousness. That night, after Emma fell asleep in the Dragon Palace, Ethan and Victoria sat in the kitchen with leftover pizza and the comfortable exhaustion that came from a day well spent. I talked to the board about something else today, Victoria said. What? I'm setting up a foundation, using my father's estate and a portion of my own assets. It's going to help families with kids who need expensive medical care but can't afford it. Ethan stared at her. Victoria, I'm calling it the Emma Cole Foundation, if that's okay with you. You can't. That's too much. It's not nearly enough. Victoria's voice was firm. Do you know how many families are going through what you went through? Working 2 jobs, barely making rent, watching their kids suffer because they can't afford treatment? I can't fix everything, but I can fix this. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Why? Because Emma shouldn't have been the lucky one. Every kid deserves the same chance she got. Victoria paused. And because you taught me something important. What's that? That money doesn't mean anything unless you use it to make the world less cruel. Ethan pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. The good kind of tears, the kind that came from finally understanding your own purpose. The foundation launched 3 weeks later with a quiet press release and a modest website. Victoria hadn't expected much attention. Instead, it exploded. Within 48 hours, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet. Parents were calling, crying, thanking Victoria for giving their kids a chance. Other wealthy donors were reaching out wanting to contribute. The foundation's capacity quadrupled in a single week. I don't understand, Victoria said, staring at her laptop in disbelief. I thought maybe we'd help 5 or 6 families a year, but this, we could help hundreds. People respond to real things, Ethan said. You're not just writing checks. You're someone who showed up to a hospital for a kid who wasn't even yours. That matters to people. Emma wandered over and climbed into Victoria's lap. Are you still Lady Star? Always. Good. Lady Star helps people. That's her job. Victoria hugged Emma close and met Ethan's eyes over her head. When did we get so lucky? I'm not sure we did, Ethan said. I think we just finally stopped being afraid to try. In early June, 8 weeks after Emma's surgery, Dr. Lawson cleared her for normal activities. Her heart function is excellent, the doctor said, showing them the latest scans. No restrictions. She can run, play, do whatever she wants. Emma looked up at Ethan with shining eyes. Can we go to the park? The big one with the playground? Absolutely. They went that afternoon, all 3 of them plus Mrs. Martinez, who insisted on coming along to take photos. Emma ran straight for the swings, laughing with pure joy at the feeling of moving without getting winded. Ethan watched from a bench, his heart so full it hurt. Victoria sat beside him, her hand in his. Look at her. I am. She's going to be okay. Really okay. Yeah, she is. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma play. Mrs. Martinez was pushing her on the swings, both of them laughing at something. After a while, Victoria said, I've been thinking about something. What? I want to sell the penthouse. It never felt like home anyway. Just a place I slept between work marathons. And then what? I was thinking maybe... Victoria paused. Maybe we could find a place together. Something with enough room for all of us. A real home. Ethan's pulse quickened. All of us? If you want that. I know it's fast and we haven't really talked about what this is between us, but I want that, Ethan interrupted. I want all of it. You, me, Emma. A home that belongs to all of us. Victoria's smile was radiant. Yeah? Yeah. Emma came running over, breathless and beaming. Did you see how high I went? I went so high I almost touched the sky. We saw, Victoria said, pulling Emma onto her lap. You were amazing. Can we come back tomorrow? We can come back every day if you want. Every day forever? Every day forever, Victoria confirmed. Emma settled against her chest, content. This is the best day. Looking at them, his daughter and the woman he loved, both of them healthy and happy, and his, Ethan had to agree. The apartment search took 2 months. They looked at probably 40 places, some too small, some too expensive, some in the wrong neighborhood. Victoria wanted space for an office. Ethan wanted a yard where Emma could play. Emma wanted a room big enough for her expanding dragon drawing collection. Finally, in late August, they found it. A 3-bedroom house in Queens with a small backyard and a kitchen that actually fit more than one person. It needed work. The paint was old, the floors were scratched, and the bathroom fixtures looked like they'd been installed sometime in the 1970s. But it had good bones, and light, and enough room for all of them to breathe. This is it, Victoria said, standing in the empty living room. You sure? It needs a lot of renovation. I'm sure. She looked at Ethan. We can make it ours. Emma was already running through the house, declaring which room would be hers and where the Dragon Palace would go and whether they could paint one wall purple. At least one wall purple, Victoria called after her. They moved in 3 weeks later. The first night in the new house was chaos. Boxes everywhere, furniture in wrong rooms, nobody could find anything. They ordered pizza because the kitchen wasn't unpacked yet, and ate sitting on the floor surrounded by packing materials. Emma fell asleep at 7:30, worn out from the excitement. Ethan carried her to her new room, currently just a mattress on the floor, and 17 boxes of toys, and tucked her in. When he came back downstairs, Victoria was standing in the middle of the living room, looking overwhelmed. This is crazy, right? 6 months ago, I was sleeping in a penthouse and running a company. Now I'm standing in a fixer-upper in Queens surrounded by boxes, and I have no idea where anything is. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. Regrets? Not even a little bit. She turned to face him. This is the happiest I've ever been. Even with the chaos? Especially with the chaos. Because it's our chaos. Real and messy and perfect. They kissed in their new living room, surrounded by the physical evidence of the life they were building together. Later, lying in bed in their new bedroom, also mostly unpacked boxes, Victoria said, I want to marry you. Ethan's heart stopped. What? Not today. Not even soon, necessarily, but someday. I want to marry you and officially be Emma's mom and build this whole ridiculous life together. She propped herself up on one elbow. Is that crazy? Completely crazy. But I want that too. All of it. Victoria grinned. Good. Because Emma's already planning the wedding. Apparently it involves dragons and at least 47 flowers, and everyone has to wear crowns. Naturally. And she wants to be the flower girl and the ring bearer and possibly the officiant. That's a lot of jobs for one kid. She says she can handle it because she has 17 legs. Ethan laughed and pulled Victoria close. I love you, both of you, so much it scares me sometimes. Good. Being scared means it matters. When did you get so wise? I learned from a single dad who taught me that the best things in life are the ones that terrify you. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, in a house that was slowly becoming home. September brought new routines. Emma started first grade at a school 3 blocks from the house. She made friends quickly, loud, energetic kids who came over to play and left trails of destruction in their wake. Victoria learned to keep spare snacks on hand and not freak out when someone spilled juice on the carpet. Ethan went back to work, but this time doing consulting on his own terms. He set his own hours, chose his own clients, and made sure he was always home for dinner. Victoria threw herself into the foundation. She hired a small staff, established partnerships with hospitals across the country, and personally reviewed every application that came through. Some nights she worked late, but she never missed Emma's bedtime stories or weekend pancake breakfasts. They were figuring it out, this strange, unexpected life they'd stumbled into. It wasn't always easy. They argued sometimes about money, about parenting decisions, about whose turn it was to do laundry. Victoria had moments where she missed the adrenaline of corporate life. Ethan had moments where fear crept back in, and he worried about losing everything again. But they worked through it, together. In October, Victoria's father's former colleagues held a memorial service for him, 1 year after his death. Victoria had dreaded it for weeks. "You don't have to go," Ethan told her the morning of the service. "I do. He deserves that." "Then we'll go with you." "You don't have to." "Victoria, we're going with you." The service was held at the company headquarters, now under Elena's capable leadership and thriving. Former employees spoke about Victoria's father with genuine affection, sharing stories of his kindness and vision. Victoria stood at the front of the room when it was her turn to speak. "My father taught me a lot of things," she began, her voice steady. "How to read a balance sheet, how to negotiate, how to command a room." She paused. "But the most important thing he taught me, I didn't understand until recently. He taught me that success means nothing if you're alone at the top." She looked at Ethan and Emma sitting in the front row. "He would have loved them," Victoria continued, her voice thick. "My daughter and the man who taught me what it means to be brave. Dad would have spent hours building ridiculous dragon kingdoms and pretending to be scared of Emma's imaginary monsters. He would have liked Ethan, maybe better than he liked me." People laughed softly. "I spent years trying to honor his legacy by being the perfect CEO, but I think the real way to honor him is by living. Really living, not just working, by loving people, by being present, by measuring success in moments instead of money." She stepped down from the podium and went straight to Emma, who climbed into her arms. "Did I do good?" Emma whispered. "You didn't do anything, sweetheart." "I sat very still and quiet. Daddy said that was my job." Victoria smiled through tears. "You did perfect." That night, after Emma was asleep, Victoria and Ethan sat in the backyard of their house. It was cold for October, but they'd bundled up in blankets and were sharing a bottle of wine. "Thank you for today," Victoria said. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You didn't have to come. It wasn't your grief, wasn't your history, but you showed up anyway." "That's what family does." Victoria looked at him. "Is that what we are? Family, aren't we?" "I guess we are. Legally speaking, not yet, but in every way that matters." She stopped. "Yeah, we're family." Ethan pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Victoria's breath caught. "I know you said you wanted to wait," Ethan said, "and we can, but I wanted you to have this anyway, as a promise, if nothing else." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing flashy, nothing corporate, just real. "It was my grandmother's," Ethan explained. "The only thing I have left from her. She wore it for 53 years, through everything, poverty, war, 3 kids, more hardship than anyone should face. But she wore it, and it meant something." Victoria's eyes were wet. "Ethan, you don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever if you don't want to, but I wanted you to know that I'm in this. Completely. For however long you'll have me." Victoria took the ring from the box with shaking hands. "Can I put it on?" "It's yours. Do whatever you want with it." She slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Yes," she said. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want this. You, Emma, the chaos, all of it. Yes to every single part of this ridiculous, unexpected life we've built." Ethan kissed her while the October wind blew cold around them and the lights from their house glowed warm behind them. They set the date for the following spring. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and family in the backyard of their house. Emma insisted on 17 different kinds of flowers and crowns for everyone and a cake shaped like a dragon. "It's going to be ridiculous," Victoria said while looking at Emma's detailed wedding plans, which included construction paper diagrams and extensive color-coded notes. "Absolutely ridiculous," Ethan agreed. "I can't wait." The weeks before the wedding were a blur of preparation and normal life. Victoria's foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. They were now helping over 200 families annually. Ethan's consulting business was thriving. Emma was excelling in school and had started a dragon club that met every Tuesday after school to draw and tell stories. 3 days before the wedding, Victoria got a call from David Chen. "I have something you need to see," he said. He sent over a link to a news article. The headline read, "Former Hale Dynamics board member Sebastian Ward sentenced to 12 years for fraud." Victoria read the article twice. The FBI investigation had uncovered even more corruption than they'd initially found. Sebastian had been stealing from the company for over a decade, manipulating stock prices, bribing officials. The evidence was overwhelming. How do you feel? Ethan asked after she told him. Relieved, angry, sad. Victoria set down her phone. He was my father's best friend. They built that company together, and the whole time he was just... She couldn't finish. Your father didn't know. No, but I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. All the times Sebastian said something that should have raised red flags. You were grieving. You were doing your best. My best almost destroyed everything. Ethan took her hands. But it didn't. You caught him. You stopped him. And you built something better in the aftermath. We built something better. Yeah, we did. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing a pillowcase cape and a construction paper crown. Is it time for wedding practice yet? Victoria checked her watch. We're practicing at 2 p.m., remember? But that's forever away. It's 45 minutes. Forever, Emma insisted. They spent the afternoon doing a rehearsal in the backyard. Emma took her duties as flower girl extremely seriously, walking at an unnaturally slow pace while sprinkling petals with the precision of a surgeon. Perfect, Victoria said, trying not to laugh. I know, I've been practicing for weeks. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, one of those perfect spring days where everything felt possible. Victoria woke up in her old bedroom at Mrs. Martinez's apartment, where she'd stayed the night before because Emma insisted it was traditional. Ethan was at the house with Emma, probably panicking about some last-minute detail. Her phone buzzed with a text. Ethan. Emma wants to know if dragons can be part of the ceremony. Victoria. Real dragons or imaginary ones? Ethan. She says the distinction is offensive. Victoria. Tell her imaginary dragons are welcome. Real ones might scare the guests. Ethan. She says that's fair. Victoria smiled and set down her phone. In a few hours, she'd be married. To a man she'd met on a turbulent flight who'd protected her without asking for anything, who'd taught her what it meant to be human again. Life was strange, and perfect, and terrifying, and she wouldn't change a single thing. The ceremony was small and chaotic and wonderful. Emma walked down the aisle, scattering petals with the utmost seriousness, wearing a purple dress and a crown covered in glitter. Mrs. Martinez cried through the entire thing. The handful of guests, mostly Victoria's remaining board members who'd become genuine friends, and Ethan's former colleagues who'd stood by him through everything, smiled and clapped. When it was time for vows, Ethan went first. I'm not good at speeches, he began. But Victoria, you walked into my life when I'd given up on letting anyone in. You were stubborn and exhausted and trying so hard to hold everything together. You reminded me of myself. He paused. You loved my daughter like she was yours before I even knew what we were to each other. You showed up at hospitals and built blanket forts and learned to make moon cookies, even though you burned the first batch. People laughed. You taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do. So I'm standing here in front of everyone telling you that I love you completely. And I promise to keep showing up, keep being honest, keep building this messy, ridiculous life with you. Victoria was crying before she even started her vows. Ethan, I spent 30 years believing that success meant having power and money and control. Then I fell asleep on your shoulder during a storm, and you protected me without knowing who I was or what I could offer you. That moment changed everything. She wiped her eyes. You showed me what it means to measure life in kindness instead of accomplishments. You and Emma gave me a family when I thought I'd be alone forever. And you taught me that the best things in life are the ones that scare you, because they matter enough to be scary. She looked down at Emma, who was standing beside her. I promise to be the best mom I can be to this brilliant, creative, dragon-obsessed kid. I promise to show up even when it's hard. I promise to keep trying even when I fail. And I promise to love both of you for the rest of my life. The officiant, a friend of Ethan's from his old engineering days, pronounced them married. Emma cheered so loudly that several people jumped. The reception was in the backyard, which they'd transformed with fairy lights and flowers, and a cake that did indeed look like a dragon. Emma gave a speech about how Lady Star and Sir Toolbox were now officially official, and everyone had to call them King and Queen of the Dragon Kingdom. I don't think that's how marriage works, Ethan whispered to Victoria. Shh, let her have this. They danced in the grass while Emma ran around with the other kids, high on cake and excitement. Victoria's head rested on Ethan's shoulder, the same shoulder she'd slept on all those months ago. I can't believe this is real, she murmured. Which part? All of it. You, Emma, this house, this life. 6 months ago, I was alone in a penthouse wondering if anything mattered. And now? Now I know exactly what matters. As the sun set and the party wound down, Emma climbed into Victoria's lap, exhausted. Best wedding ever, she mumbled. Yeah? Yeah. Because now you're really my mom, not just pretend. Victoria's throat tightened. Is that okay with you? Duh. I picked you, remember? When I was in the hospital and drew the picture of all of us together. I knew even then. You're pretty smart for a 6-year-old. 7 next month, and I know it's the 17 legs. Emma fell asleep right there, safe and warm and loved. Ethan sat down beside them. This is it, huh? This is our life now. This is our life, Victoria confirmed. And sitting there in their backyard with their daughter asleep between them and fairy lights twinkling overhead, both of them understood something fundamental. Success wasn't about money or power or corner offices. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers or never being afraid. Success was this, messy and complicated and real. It was showing up for people even when it was hard. It was choosing love even when it scared you. It was measuring your life in moments that mattered instead of achievements that impressed. It was a 6-year-old with 17 imaginary legs teaching you about bravery. It was a stranger protecting you during a storm. It was finding family in the most unexpected places. It was learning that being broken didn't mean being worthless. It just meant you were human. And being human was enough, more than enough. It was everything. 2 years later, Victoria stood in the playground near the children's hospital, the one Ethan had built with the donated funds intended for Emma's surgery. The playground he'd never told her about until she'd followed a cryptic note he'd left one morning. Emma was running through the equipment, laughing with other kids whose families were going through the same fears they'd once faced. The foundation had helped fund this playground, along with dozens of others across the country. But this one was special, because it was where Ethan's heart lived, in helping others the way he'd wished someone had helped him. You did this, Victoria said, watching him tighten bolts on a swing set. You took the worst experience of your life and turned it into something beautiful. We did this, Ethan corrected. The foundation made it possible. But it was your idea, your heart. He straightened up and pulled her close. My heart is right here, with you and Emma. This playground is just what? Just proof that good things can come from hard things. That pain doesn't have to be wasted. Victoria rested her head on his shoulder, that same shoulder from the plane, now familiar and safe and home. Around them, children played and laughed. Parents watched with the mixture of hope and fear that came from loving someone fragile. The afternoon sun painted everything gold. You know what I was thinking about? Victoria said. That night on the plane, when I fell asleep on you and you got that bruise. If someone had told me then that this was where we'd end up, married, with a daughter, running a foundation, building playgrounds, I would have thought they were crazy. Would you have believed them? No, but I would have hoped they were right. Emma came running over, breathless and beaming. Mom! Dad! Come see what I found! Mom and Dad. The words still made Victoria's heart skip. They followed Emma to a corner of the playground where someone had scratched something into a wooden beam. 3 stick figures, one with 17 legs, and the words, Dragon Kingdom Forever. I didn't do it, Emma said quickly. It was already here, but I think it's a sign. A sign of what? Ethan asked. That this is where we're supposed to be, all of us. Emma grabbed both their hands. Together. And standing there in the playground Ethan had built, surrounded by families finding hope in the darkest times, Victoria understood what Emma meant. This was exactly where they were supposed to be. Not because it was easy or perfect or went according to plan, but because they'd chosen it, chosen each other, even when it was terrifying. Even when it didn't make sense. Even when the bruises hurt and the path was unclear and the future was uncertain. They'd chosen kindness over comfort, love over fear, each other over everything else. And that choice, that simple, terrifying, beautiful choice, had made all the difference. Victoria looked at Ethan and Emma, at the playground full of children, at the life they'd built from broken pieces and unexpected grace. Come on, she said, pulling them toward the slides. Lady Star wants to race. You're going to lose, Emma warned. I have 17 legs, remember? We'll see about that. They ran together into the afternoon light, three people who'd found each other in a storm and decided to build a home in the calm that followed. Imperfect and messy and real. Exactly as it should be. Because sometimes the best stories don't start with happily ever after. They start with a bruise, a stranger's kindness, and a choice to believe that maybe, just maybe, there's something worth fighting for on the other side of fear. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that choice leads you home.